Hello, Minnesota Studies students. Mr. Burns here with you. Today I want to share a little bit about our field trip that my family and I took on May 3rd, 2020. As we made our journey west out of Lonsdale, Minnesota, one of the things we noticed quickly was how flat the land was. Thinking of the agriculture that had taken over this land that was once occupied by the Dakota as they were chasing large bison through the tall prairie grasses in this area. As we continue our journey west, we come across a small town called Franklin. Chances are, if the railroad doesn't come through in the 1860s, Franklin does not become a town. And after an hour and a half drive, we arrive at our first destination, the Lower Sioux Agency of the Dakota community. When you arrive at the Minnesota Historical Society's Lower Sioux Agency, one of the first things you see is the Visitors Building. Upon arrival, during a normal year, you'd be able to go in and take a look around and see some of the historic artifacts. However, this year, we weren't able to do that. So we continued on the agency path. We took the shorter route as we knew that we had many other places to go today. One of the things that you'll notice that we are walking up to is this large warehouse building right here. And this warehouse building was built and completed in 1861. If you remember, the U.S.-Dakota War took place in 1862. However, this building was completed by Thomas Galbraith and others as a way to distribute the food to the Dakota during that time period at the Lower Sioux Agency. Food and supplies would come here. Another piece that was pretty cool was the fact that this path that we are walking on right now was actually used 150, 180 years ago when people were traveling between Fort Ridgely and the Lower Sioux Agency and Fort Ridgely and the Upper Sioux Agency. Pretty cool to think that this path has been here for that long.
Born in something, Scotland. Center. I can't read this.
As we were leaving the Lower Sioux Agency, we came across a couple trading post sites. The Roberts Trading Post site at the Lower Sioux Agency and also Andrew Myrick's trading post location. As the war broke out on August 18, 1862, the Dakota killed Andrew Myrick and stuffed what down his throat? The second stop on our journey takes us to a location called Birch Coulee, which so happened to be the largest battle in the U.S.-Dakota War. The United States military had left Fort Ridgely and they were heading to the Lower Sioux Agency, where they could go ahead and respectfully bury those that were killed, settlers and others, by the Dakota at the Lower Sioux Agency. Halfway there, they decided to rest at this location for the night. When they were there, though, what they didn't realize is that Dakota bands had surrounded this area and were ready to attack them once morning hit. The battle began on September 2nd, 1862. The United States Guard sensed movement in the grasses and fired a warning shot, and the Dakota attacked. The battle lasted for 36 hours until reinforcements from Fort Ridgely, led by Henry Sibley, could arrive. The death toll for the United States military was 15 soldiers dead and over 90 service horses dead as well. When I stand on these plaques here, you can see off in the distance a white post. Those white posts represent where the Dakota were staging their attack towards the United States military on this day of September 2nd. This particular location is now a county park where people can come and visit and see the different sights and sounds of Birch Coulee. Once our family was finished at Birch Coulee, we headed south and east to Fort Ridgely along the Minnesota River. Fort Ridgely was originally established in 1855 and to act as a buffer between the Dakota and the new settlers arriving into Minnesota. It ended up being about a 4-day travel on the Minnesota River from Fort Snelling to Fort Ridgely. Many in the military wanted to really try to protect the Dakota. They felt like there were many white settlers who were trying to infringe on the Dakota reservation at that time, and so the military at that post really tried hard to help the Dakota in keeping the settlers away. A couple of the barracks at Fort Ridgely were quite large. This one, for example, here you can see the footings. They stretch about 80 yards long and about 30 yards wide. It was a pretty impressive structure back then. You can see those little circles. There's about 3 to 4 of them there. Those are where the chimneys were, and those were used to heat the facility during the evening times in those cold winter months. And this building right here is where the ammunition was stored on the northwestern part of the fort. What's really nice about Fort Ridgely is it confirms a lot of the information that we've already learned about. We talked about the Treaty of Traverse des Sioux in 1851. And that image there you see in the background, we talked about that at the start of chapter 6. There's multiple reasons why I think this sign is very important. First, it talks about the events that led up to the U.S.-Dakota War, the neglecting of the United States government in providing food and supplies for the Dakota based on the treaties that were signed. But what I also enjoy about this sign is it talks about the locations of the different battles and where they actually took place in the U.S.-Dakota War of 1862. This monument here was erected to honor those who were killed by the Dakota in the U.S.-Dakota War, both settlers and military personnel. Fort Ridgely stayed open until 1867, until it was deemed no longer necessary by the United States government as westward expansion had pushed further west. The last stop on our journey takes us through New Ulm to Mankato, the site of the United States' largest mass execution, where 38 Dakota soldiers were hung on December 26, 1862. When we arrived in Mankato, one of the first things we noticed as we were coming to Reconciliation Park was this grain elevator on the north-hand side. And you can see the artistic ability of the individuals who were painting this, painting two different cultures, that of the Dakota and that of the settlers. Present day, however, present day. And it's really cool to see the two different cultures coming together here in Mankato. And that's what Reconciliation Park is all about. Reconciliation Park is the two communities coming together, that of the settlers and that of the Dakota, and recognizing the differences and coming back together. Thank you for coming along on this journey with me. I really appreciate it. I really enjoy doing this with my family, and I would encourage you and your family to go check out different locations throughout Minnesota that talks about Minnesota's history. We went to Lower Sioux Agency, Birch Coulee, Fort Ridgely, and our final stop was Reconciliation Park. I hope you enjoyed the video.